North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly, truthfully. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point both of those out. In other words, we depropagandize America's news. And we bring it to you Monday through Friday from 2 until 5 p.m. live Central Time. It is the day after Election Day, but it's still Election Day. The President of the United States will hold a midterm election press conference at 3 p.m. Central Time. We will cover it live here on the Wells Report. It was a very, very big day. There were a lot of things that happened, and we are going to bring you all of the details. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. By all means, join us as soon as you can and tell us what you saw in yesterday's election events. Tell us what you think. 817-379-2172. We will take calls as they come in, should you choose to speak. If you'd like to take part in the chat room, you can at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, any platform that you can find us on. You can certainly contact us on the chat room. Still waiting to see who is going to win the chat room derby this morning. This morning. Did I say this morning? It's this afternoon. Been a big day. Lots of things to do. And yeah, I got about 5 hours of sleep last night. So if this is a little, shall we say, sketchy, that's why. I'm okay. I'm just kidding. Gary Abshire wins the chat room derby. He says, well, it's not election day any longer. It's election season, apparently. The same people that had trouble last time in the last election had trouble this time in this election, and we will cover all of those. Okay? So what do you say we get started? Let's go to USA Today and start. This is what you need to know to get up to speed, according to USA Today. Republicans notch wins, but Democrats try to fight the red wave. The red wave of Republican victories that pollsters and analysts projected in the 2022 midterms has not yet come to shore by the time observers went to sleep last night. Observers like me. Several of the most watched midterm elections remain too close to call. We're also still waiting on House seats to determine control. By midday today, either side could not decisively claim control of Congress. House seats in New York and California didn't yet have a winner, nor did Senate seats in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. The Georgia Senate race between Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock and former professional football player Herschel Walker will go to a runoff. Great. It's like Groundhog Election Day. There will be 4 more weeks left in election season. That contest will take place next month. That's already been announced by Georgia election officials. Here are how the marquee races ended. Democrat Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman beat Republican television personality Dr. Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania's Senate nail-biter. Republican J.D. Vance claimed victory over Democrat Representative Tim Ryan in Ohio. In Florida, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis cruised to victory. It was a landslide over Charlie Crist. Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, also a landslide against Democrat Representative Val Demings. Republican Senator Ron Johnson won his reelection bid in Wisconsin by about 25,000 votes. This is a history-making House win, says USA Today. One thing about the House is certain: it will have its first Generation Z member. 25-year-old Maxwell Frost won election in Florida and took Demings' seat. Voters in several states weighed in on abortion, voting rights, and marijuana. Yeah, so that's what's going on. All right? The race for the U.S. Senate seat will head into a runoff. Unofficial returns from the Georgia Secretary of State showed Warnock leading with approximately 49.4% of the vote. You got to have 50% plus 1. Walker had 48.5%, a difference of just over 35,000 votes. The remaining votes went to a third-party candidate, Libertarian Chase Oliver, who captured just over 2% of the votes. or more than 81,000 ballots in this race. Under Georgia law, if no candidate receives more than 50% of the ballots cast, the top two finishers head to a runoff. Election officials in multiple states expected vote counting and certifications to continue throughout the week. USA Today, the USA Today network, is on the ground monitoring what's happening across the country the day after the polls closed. Democrat incumbent Governor Laura Kelly secured a victory in her bid for re-election, fending off Republican challenger and state attorney Derek Schmidt. Okay, that's Derek Schmidt. And let's see. What else happened? Kelly positioned herself through the campaign as a moderate, pro-business Democrat. Schmidt aimed to paint her as a liberal Biden lackey whose policies have done little to curb inflation or lower the cost of living. Though Kansas has long been a Republican stronghold, after the state rejected a potential abortion ban in August, Democrats were hopeful the issue would galvanize voters in their favor. Kelly had been a vocal supporter of abortion, while Schmidt has said he wants fewer abortions but respects the decision made by the state's voters. While the candidates were split on a number of hot-button social issues like school curricula and transgender participation in sports, the driving theme of the race was the economy, with both Kelly and Schmidt pitching themselves as the right remedy for tough times. Let's see. The Democrats took full control of the Michigan legislature for the first time in decades. Democrats powered their way to control of the Michigan House and Senate in Tuesday's election. They also watched as Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer was the victor in her re-election campaign. It marks the first time that the Democrat Party have secured a majority of seats in both legislative chambers in nearly 40 years. The shift is perhaps the starkest sign that Michigan voters rejected the red wave predicted by Republicans, instead opting for Democrats in more competitive races shaped largely by redistricting. The Associated Press has not yet confirmed the results of each race. Current Republican leaders in both House and Senate acknowledge they lost power, and their Democrat counterparts have claimed victory. This is in Michigan. While the margins are narrow, Tuesday's midterm election gives newly re-elected Governor Gretchen Whitmer's party power in the state's upper and lower chambers. That paves the way to a number of policies Whitmer and fellow Democrats failed to make headway on during the governor's first term and for the years prior in Lansing. GOP candidate Michael Lawler unseated Representative Sean Maloney in New York. He serves as the chairman of the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee. This is embarrassing for him because he was the guy that was responsible for getting Democrat congressional campaign candidates elected. This was a suburban New York City district President Joe Biden won easily in the 2020 election. The campaign grew intense interest from national political funders who spent $8.8 million to oppose Maloney and $3.7 million to oppose Lawler. This according to OpenSecrets.org. Maloney is a five-term House member, is the second straight DCC chair to face a challenging re-election. In fact, he lost. Incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson is the projected winner of the U.S. Senate race in Wisconsin, defeating the state's Democrat Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, according to CNN, ABC News, and NBC News. A marquee race targeted by both sides for capturing Senate control. The contest was expected to be close, although most polling in the weeks leading up to the election favored Johnson. This according to 538. A Marquette University Law School poll last week had Johnson up 50 to 48%. Pretty solid polling results that were proved last night. Quote, I want to thank my family and everyone who supported me and worked so hard to save this U.S. Senate seat. Johnson continued by saying, I will do everything I can to make things better for Wisconsinites and to heal and unify our country, unquote. Johnson is a former plastics company executive, first elected during the anti-establishment Republican Tea Party wave of 2010, and has been one of Trump's biggest supporters in the Senate. Election officials in Georgia Senate recount. It's happening. At least Georgia election officials have a sense of humor. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's families endured death threats when he refused former President Trump's entreaties to find him votes in 2020. His top deputy, Gabriel Sterling, had to proffer explanations day after day to shoot down conspiracy theories pushed by Trump and his legal team to try to baselessly overturn the results. Okay, so that's bias. All right, so that's USA Today bias. Absolutely unnecessary to report, especially when the headline is, or the first line of the story is, at least Georgia election officials have a sense of humor. And yet this week, facing another election with nationwide implications and a Trump-backed U.S. Senate candidate in a squeaky tight race, former NFL star Herschel Walker, Sterling in the wee hours took to Twitter to say, "Well, bring it." Quote, while county officials are still doing detailed work on counting the votes, we feel it's safe to say there will be a runoff for the U.S. Senate here in Georgia, slated for December 6th. This accompanied a GIF of fans watching a game in a bar with an all caps caption, quote, the only thing that could make this any better is overtime, unquote. Thus the humor. Democrat incumbent Raphael Warnock is leading Walker by 36,000 votes within a single percentage point margin. There may be another reason for levity in Sterling's office. Raffensperger won re-election yesterday by nearly a 10-point margin. Let's see. Sluggish vote counting, slim leads. What's going on with governor's races? 4 governor races are too close to call as of midday today, with some sluggish vote counting and Democrats clinging to slim leads in Kansas and Oregon. I believe the Kansas City race has already been, or the Kansas race has already been called. I think we just reported that. In Arizona, Katie Hobbs, Democrat Katie Hobbs leads Trump-backed Republican Kari Lake, but only 64% of the votes had been counted. Lake, a former television news anchor, is favored to win, has refused to say if she will accept the results if she loses. Hobbs, Arizona's Secretary of State, said Tuesday night the tabulating final results could take days. By the way, it was very interesting that she, as a gubernatorial candidate, was also the Secretary of State responsible for the results of the election. A lot of people raised eyebrows over that. In Alaska, incumbent Republican Governor Mike Dunleavy was way ahead with 52%, but only 75% of the state's estimated votes had been counted. With the state's rugged and rural terrain, it's unclear how long the remaining counting will take. I've been there. I've been to Alaska. It is rugged. It is rural. It is amazing. You ought to go. You ought to go see it. In Oregon, Democrat Tina Kotek held a slim lead over Republican Christine Drazan all night, but the race remained too close to call. The contest represents the best shot Republicans have had in 4 decades at winning the state's top elected office. In Kansas, Democrat incumbent Laura Kelly was slightly ahead of a Republican challenger Derek Schmidt. Kelly had been polling several percentage points ahead of Schmidt, the state's attorney general, but the race was within 1.5 percentage points, with 99% of the estimated vote counted. All right, so that is the update from USA Today. There are other stories that we will be dealing with coming up in just a couple of seconds. We'll have that for you right after the break. What else is going on? I am so glad you asked that question. There are a lot of very interesting questions being asked, and there are a lot of people scratching their heads. We'll have all that, and don't forget, the President of the United States will hold a midterms election news conference at 3 p.m. Central Time. That'll be 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And so we'll be covering that live. As you know, we do that on the Wells Report. We cover the President of the United States when he speaks. Back with more in a moment. Stay where you are. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You be the pundit. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you saw yesterday. Tell me what you're seeing today. Share your ideas, viewpoints, etc. on the election yesterday that is now turning into another election season. With the Georgia senatorial runoff, we got 4 more weeks of winter. Ish. So there you go. People are weighing in on the chat room at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Also, if you are watching on Rumble and Patreon, send me an email. Tell me what you think about yesterday's election and today's news about yesterday's election. But when you send me an email at thewellsreport@frontier.com, please do me a favor. In the subject line, please put Patreon or YouTube or whatever it is that you send, whatever platform you're watching on, put that in the subject line so I know it's you so I can get back to you, okay? Let's see what's going on. Gary said, yeah, it's voting season now. Yeah, apparently. Let's see. Ann says, I saw a lot of machines have weird things going on in weird places. Yeah, isn't it crazy? Why does this keep happening in swing states? Anyway, at least we got the House back, but the red wave did not happen. True. J.J. Austin is one of America's greatest radio personalities. I had the very good fortune to work with JJ, and she's checking us out today on Facebook. She says, great to see and hear you, my friend. You are so awesome. I wonder if she's actually, is she aware that she's talking to me? Are you talking to me? Let's see. Yvonne Field says hello. Gary says, Georgia, there it is. People not voting for who can beat the Democrat, causing a runoff. Yeah, there you go. Let's see. Yvonne says, hi, JD and all. Hi, darling Evie. How's it going? Langston says, hello, room. How was that red wave? I mean, Ripple loves to bait the bulldog. Yeah, that's that very, very unattractive smugness that a lot of Democrats have. No big deal. That's the way it goes. The people that have to look at these things say, how interesting. There are a lot of questions here. And not just not about conspiratorial things, just questions in general about American politics. Let's see what else. Buddy says, what in the world is the matter with the people of Pennsylvania? Is it because Fetterman has a D after his name? Well, actually, in point of fact, I can tell you this. My in-laws live in Pennsylvania. And it's amazing that anything anyone with a D will do. In other words, any D will do when it comes to voting in Pennsylvania. There's a story in USA Today that says, Pennsylvania is not a swing state anymore. And I happen to agree. I don't believe that that's the case. We got somebody new here today. His name is, or her name is, Grab Shrimp. I love these handles. He's joining us on Twitter. And no, Twitch. Is that Twitch? What's the one with it? I think it's Twitch. Anyway, he says this. He says, if you went in a time machine back to ancient Rome, would you have political views or just enjoy and explore? That's actually a very good question. I'd do both. I absolutely would do both. I would do my absolute dead level best to find out as much as I possibly could about that amazing city. And then try not to come down with bubonic plague or something. Or get killed for no reason. Disturbing that Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke, the tall, skinny Irish kid from El Paso, got as many votes as he got in Texas. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. He got crushed. And this may be the end of Beto O'Rourke. Although somebody says, he could always move to Louisiana and still call himself Beto. Just Beteaux. Yeah, that's possibility. It's a possibility. Let's see. Cool, Indiana. Someone says the cheating never ends. I'm not so sure about that, but we can certainly take a look at things as they unfold, huh? Too early to make any kind of statement like that, I think, Beth. But we'll see, says the Zen Master. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. People are weighing in on the chat room. Must be, Jenny says, must be talking about my President Trump. Biden is not my president, so I guess Trump won't be speaking just yet. Yeah, there you go. Technically, President Trump is a former president, just for officialdom. Let's see who else. Let's see what else is going on. Swing states. Okay, all jokes aside, we won the House? ? Still up for grabs. Still looks pretty good. Karl Rove last night expects that the Republicans will have somewhere between 20 and 25 more seats than Democrats. Let's Gary Abshire says after the election of John Fetterman, Pennsylvania is brain damaged, so it makes sense they voted one in. Ew, ow. Let's see. Beth says, why do you think the installed actor playing the role of Joe said it'll take 5 days? They're up to something. Okay. Gosh, can you imagine actually being an actor trying to play Joe Biden? I mean, who could do it? You know, the only person that could do it would be what? Forrest Gump? I mean, it would be Tom Hanks because of his Forrest Gump role. That was probably not nice. I'm just kidding. Let's see. Somebody else says they're trying to change the votes just like the last election, ? Let's see. Always will be suspicious. No confidence in electronic voting ever again. Let's see. Hey, Mike. Yeah, Beto is better suited for some small city council in New Mexico or California. Those Trump-endorsed candidates are not doing so well. Well, I believe he's 1-1. That's the last word I heard, Isaac. If you have any further update on that, let me know. Like Mark Davis admitted, maybe it's time to move on from Trump's juvenile behavior. Could be. But then again, the people know. I mean, only the people of the United States know the answers to these questions. All right. Let's see what else. Or maybe Beto O'Rourke could be the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. I don't know. I don't know. There's a really good joke in there, but I'm going to govern myself just because. Let's see. Oh, by the way, Beth says that there are 3 Biden doubles. 3 of them. Okay. You're giving too much credit comparing Biden to Forrest Gump. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you find value in this broadcast, by the way, please share it with your friends. Please do subscribe on the platform you're watching. Also, by the way, do us all a favor. Give us a thumbs up. All right. If you want to throw money at this particular endeavor, you can. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report and toss me $1 a month. It's $1 a month. You can do more if you want to. You don't have to, but you could if you want to. Anyway, it's like $1 a month, and it would really help me out a lot because this is an independent broadcast because I'm not getting paid by anybody except maybe you. So if you'd like to help out, that would be really good. And I usually feel pretty queasy about all this. And the reason is because having been a radio personality my whole life, a radio broadcaster, I really kind of sort of plied my trade for free to listeners. This is the first time I've ever asked them to support this show. But then again, all those listeners supported this show before. They just used their ears instead of their wallets. So, and I've also noted that there are a lot of different journalistic outfits that ask for money, and I still feel kind of weird about it. But anyway, that being the case, help us out if you'd like to. So Generation Z in the House. It was a historic election, at least from this point. At age 25, Democrat Maxwell Frost made history last night. He became the first member of Generation Z to be elected to U.S. Congress. Yeah. Frost is a social justice advocate. He won his election bid against Republican Army veteran Calvin Wimbish to represent the Sunshine State's Florida's 10th congressional district. That's Central Florida. That includes the University of Central Florida, Winter Park, and Orlando, my old stomping grounds. Running in a district generally won by his party, Frost was favored to win the Orlando-based seat. History was made tonight, said the progressive activist, posting on Instagram. We made history for Floridians, Generation Z, and for everybody who believes we deserve a better future. I'm beyond thankful for the opportunity to represent my home in the United States Congress. The young African American's victory marks a crucial moment for the progressive activist who came of voting age over the past decade, known for voicing his political stance on issues, including gun violence and LGBTQ rights. Okay? Born, by the way, in 1997. 1997. I had two kids. I had two kids in 1997. Two kids. No? Yeah, two kids. No, three kids. I had three kids in 1997. Yeah. There you go. All right, so let's see. Yvonne says, we believe in you, JD, and a lot of us support you through Patreon. And you do, and I thank you so much. I thank you so much. We work really hard on this broadcast. I spend a lot of time every day. I mean, people ask me, how much time do I spend preparing the show? All of it. All of it. I literally was up last night until the wee hours of the morning. And when I woke up on the sofa and really nothing had changed, I realized everybody went to sleep, so I did too. So there you go. Let's see what else is going on here. Let's see. Joe Biden has been heard to say this was not a repudiation. President Biden holds off a red wave, gets an unexpected boost from the midterm election. Let's see what USA Today says about that. President Biden defied midterm headwinds in an improbable election yesterday as Democrats held off a Republican red wave. Many strategists predicted the red wave, giving the president unexpected momentum as he weighs whether or not to run for re-election. Although control of both chambers is still unclear, Democrats could keep control of the Senate and still have a path to keep the House. That's a scenario viewed as a long shot before the election amid voters' concerns about the economy and inflation. Legislative gridlock, possible government shutdowns, GOP investigations, those are still in play in a possible Republican-led House. But Democrats displayed surprising strength in races throughout the country, exceeding expectations and boosting President Biden on a night when most pundits anticipated a setback. So far, there have been few, if any, surprises breaking the direction of Republicans, whereas there have been surprise breaks in the direction of Democrats, said Duke University professor Asher Hildebrand. The outcome seemed to validate Biden framing the election as a battle for democracy and restoring abortion rights, a decision that was second-guessed even by fellow Democrats before yesterday. And although the president's legislative agenda is still in jeopardy if Democrats lose the House, Republicans failed to deliver the knockout punch they were looking for. Speaking of Republicans, there is an op-ed piece here by Rex Hupke. We've covered Rex a little bit. Let's cut to the chase. The ebullient Republicans who marched into Tuesday's midterm elections smugly confident they would surf to power on a mighty nationwide sweeping red wave were left high and dry. Why? I'd argue it's a testament to America's distaste for indecency. There are still races to be called, and we don't yet know which party will control the House or Senate, but it was clear by the end of the evening the GOP would come nowhere close to the liberal crushing victories predicted by party leaders and right-leaning pundits. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, he's a Republican, conceded it was definitely not a red wave. That's for darn sure. The red wave did not happen, said Myra Flores of Texas. She lost to her Democrat challenger and tweeted this: the red wave did not happen. Republicans and independents stayed home. Do not complain about the results if you did not do your part. This goes on to say by Rex Hupke, Republicans had a perfect storm until they didn't. Why did this happen? Midterm elections typically favor the party that does not hold the White House. The sitting Democrat president had low favorability numbers. Inflation, food prices are high, along with energy prices he leaves out. It was a perfect storm for Republicans, or so they, the pollsters, and the prevailing media narrative thought. Call me idealistic, but I'll posit a good number of Americans don't love it when a political party broadly embraces a bullying figure like former President Donald Trump. Some don't take kindly to political candidates who deny election results, or those who say they'll only accept an election if they win. Some don't like seeing politicians enthusiastic about taking rights away from women or from married gay and lesbian couples. Some don't appreciate a party that scapegoats transgender children to score political points, or one that accuses teachers of being groomers or pedophiles. All right, so there you go. Let's talk a little bit about this. J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance won an Ohio U.S. Senate race that captured national attention. This is analysis coming to us from Haley Bemiller, Bemiller. The outcome of the Ohio U.S. Senate race was never supposed to be a question, says USA Today. Former President Donald Trump won Ohio by 8 percentage points in 2016 and in 2020. Once a bellwether for presidential races, the state has trended toward Republicans as white working class voters abandon the Democrat Party. Democrats have seen fewer and fewer successes in statewide elections. Yet the race to replace retiring Senator Rob Portman became one of the most watched in the nation as Republicans fought harder than planned to keep a seat critical to the GOP Senate majority. Democrat U.S. Representative Tim Ryan raised millions of dollars, took advantage of a bruising GOP primary to keep the race close until the very end. But hillbilly elegy author and venture capitalist J.D. Vance put any doubts to bed. He won the race by roughly 7 percentage points, according to unofficial results, keeping up with President Trump's win in that same state. The GOP message ahead of the midterms was universal: high costs at the grocery store and gas pump are weighing on Americans. Vance beat that drum throughout the race, contending the U.S. should encourage more energy production to reduce costs. He blamed federal spending sanctioned by President Joe Biden and Democrats in Congress for high inflation rates. Beyond the economy, Vance railed against current immigration policy and tied instability at the southern border to drug overdose rates in Ohio. The Ohio Senate race was a referendum on Democrat leadership, Vance argued, and he was the antidote. The discontent helped Vance get to the finish line as he worked to reunite the party after a messy GOP primary. Some Republicans weren't thrilled with Vance when Tuesday rolled around, but they did not want to give a seat to the Democrats either. I'm a Republican. I'm not a J.D. Vance Republican, said Mark Durkid of Sycamore Township. I did vote for him because I didn't want to see 2 Democrats for senators in Ohio. I can't remember the last time Ohio had 2 Democrat senators, so it was important to me even though I didn't like the candidate. Interesting. That's an interesting observation. Vance appealed to some voters who admired his backstory, and he promised to be a different kind of senator for a different kind of Republican Party. At age 38, he'll be one of the youngest members of the U.S. Senate and the first Ohioan to win a Senate seat without ever having run for office. This is more of that very interesting predilection by American voters to elect people outside the political mainstream. That's something we ought to keep our eyes on. One thing's going to happen, hopefully, that the party is going to get a lot younger, but a lot of new blood and hopefully, a lot of new blood and hopefully some new thinking in the United States Senate, said Vance. Portman was known for his ability to broker deals and work across the aisle to pass laws, including infrastructure packages that will help Ohio repair their bridges and roads. Vance took on a statesman-like tone near the end of the campaign and pointed to several areas where he thought he could work with Democrats. Once again, I want to point this out. Look, there's a difference between compromise and cooperation. For a two-party system to work effectively, both parties need to be adversarial. Without being nasty, they just need to be adversarial. But what each party has to do was look at the Constitution of the United States. As time has gotten by, these two parties, looking at the Constitution, have slowly started looking at each other and started playing political games between themselves, trying to garner more and more power in the United States of America. The Constitution is the rallying point that all of us need to focus on, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whether you're conservative, whether you're liberal. The Constitution of the United States is the best political system yet given to us during the human endeavor. And we all have to agree on that. We do. You know, there are political changes. Some of those were called fundamental changes. President Obama said that we're going to make fundamental change to the United States. And I pointed out on this broadcast, okay, Mr. President, but when you're at the top of the pyramid, what changes are you going to make and which direction are you going to go? Arguably, that was a correct statement. That being said, We are here waiting for more information about who's going to control the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. This runoff between the Senate candidates Warnock and Walker in Georgia may drop out of the real concern portion of this particular circumstance if you're somebody rooting for a Republican-controlled Senate, because Nevada is in play and Ron Johnson was able to hold off his challenger. So if indeed the Nevada race with Paul Laxalt comes through, not Paul Laxalt, Laxalt, if it comes through, then what will end up happening is the majority will go to the Republicans, albeit razor thin. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stick around. I'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The chat room is flying. Take part. Love to hear what you have to say. Let's see what else is going on. Democrats can celebrate winning, but with them in charge, all of us in the United States suffer. Let's see. Langston says, funny, when Democrats win, there's a problem with the machine or cheating. Republicans win and America is great. I don't think I've talked about cheating at all in this conversation. I'm simply reporting the news. Let's see. Isaac says, keep riding the Trump train into the abyss. Americans don't like insurrectionists. I think that's rather heavy-handed, but Let me follow that up with this Washington Examiner op-ed piece. This from the Washington Examiner editorial staff. Republican hopes of a smashing victory in the midterm elections have fallen in ruins. There was no repudiation of governing Democrats or its leader, even if it seems likely Speaker Nancy Pelosi's grip will be pried off the House of Representatives. The precise makeup of the House remains unsettled at the time of this writing, but if Republicans win, it will be by the slimmest of margins. If results hold for Republicans in Nevada and Democrats in Arizona, the Senate will not be decided until next month, when Raphael Warnock, Heisman Trophy winner Herschel Walker, will face a runoff. But look just a little closer, especially in races for governor, and a pattern emerges. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad, said Ron DeSantis in his victory speech last night. We've embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents. We have respected our taxpayers. And we reject woke ideology. Florida voters love the message, whereas President Donald Trump barely beat Joe Biden by 3 points in the state 2 years ago. DeSantis crushed his opponent by 20 points. Other Republican governors who brought order instead of chaos also won. In Ohio, Governor Mike DeWine ran away with a 25-point victory. Governor Chris Sununu in New Hampshire won by 15 points. In Iowa, Governor Kim Reynolds won by 20 points. Meanwhile, Nevada's incumbent Democrat governor lost. Oregon's Democrat incumbent is barely hanging on, with much of the vote still left to count. Let's see what else. Trump's handpicked candidates flopped. While Sununu was breezing to victory, Trump's favorite in the same state, Don Bolduc, lost to Senator Maggie Hassan by 11 points. Democrat Josh Shapiro crushed Trump in favor of Doug Mastriano by 13 points in Pennsylvania and helped John Fetterman squeak out a 3-point victory over Dr. Mehmet Oz, another weak Trump pick. Well, this is according to Washington Examiner. By the way, I'm going to point out a little bit of bias here. Okay, the Washington Examiner hates President Trump. This paper represents the anti-Trump wing of conservative thought here in the United States. So just keep that in mind. In Georgia, where Governor Brian Kemp trounced Stacey Abrams by 8 points, Trump's pick Walker is trailing and headed into a December runoff. Like I said, there's a little bias here. They just don't like Trump. Results are not in from Arizona, but other high-profile races across the country. Trump's candidates significantly underperformed other Republicans. As terrible results rolled in overnight, Trump reportedly resorted to screaming about bad GOP candidates. But they were his people. This is his fault. Without Trump to run against, Biden, the Democrats would probably have been roundly rebuked by voters. According to an exit poll, the same one that showed 74% of voters either dissatisfied or angry about the direction of the country, the only person more disliked than Biden was Trump. President Trump joked in an Election Day interview, well, I think if Republicans win, I should get all the credit. If they lose, I should not be blamed at all. That was tongue-in-cheek. A true word is spoken in jest. The truth is this is the way that Trump thinks, so says the Washington Examiner. Entirely uninterested in the fortunes of his party or apparently the country, he regards elections not as a way of securing better governance for the public, but as a way of accumulating accolades and glory for himself. His joke captures the essence of Trump's approach. All this upside to keep, the burden is for others to bear. This is why President Trump raised over $100 million allegedly to help Republican candidates, but ended up keeping 90% of the money for himself. An election that leaves the House and Senate so closely divided may seem it does not send a clear message, but this one does. These midterm elections have made it crystal clear that voters want to move past the chaos and dishonor of the 45th president. They want the security and sanity that a competent and effective leader can provide. The Republican Party needs to recognize that too and act accordingly. What do you think? What do you think about that? Is that a good prescription by the Washington Examiner? Is the big loser in the 2020 midterm elections Donald Trump? We will see. Remember, what we have here is we have a circumstance whereby the Washington Examiner hates President Trump. They just do. But there is there are certain Republicans that are looking at this going, okay, something went wrong. One of those people may be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's Mike McCarthy. We'll be covering that as well. Stick around. The President of the United States is due to hold a midterm elections press conference just after the top of the hour. We're going to cover that like a blanket here on the Wells Report. So stand by for that. All right. As we continue with the news and the issues of the day, it is news, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. I sincerely am happy that you are here joining us. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. All righty then. So here we go and stuff like that there. Let me see if I can get this done here. I've got to turn this off and I've got to do this. I'll see you in just a little bit, okay? Well, actually, I'll just wait for a second here. Yeah, I'm gonna wait for a second. Normally, I try to get into the break a little bit early, but this time I'm not going to be able to. So what I'll do is I'll wait just a second or so, and then I will go take my break. I have a little technical business I have to take care of. Technical business. All right. So anyway, more of this coming up in just a couple of seconds. So stay where you are. The president is right around the corner, so hang in there. And let's see what else. That's about everything. I'm just waiting for the time to count to the proper point so that I can hit a button, and I will do so here in about 8 seconds. And off we go. See you in a little bit. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news. Truthfully, fairly. It's what we do. We analyze the news for fact and bias. Those first two things, they are an attempt to de-propagandize America's news. It's what we do. We also make commentary. That's not the news. That's not the news, nor is it propaganda. It's just my opinion. It's just as valuable as yours, which leads us to debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. How do you take part? Two ways. You can call us on the telephone at 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I just looked at somebody on the chat room, which you can find at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Let's see. So here we go. I'm trying to yeah, here we go. All right, here we go. Yvonne says to Isaac, who is a Democrat, we like having Isaac around because, and Langston too, because they give us perspective that we don't always hear. Yvonne says to Isaac, we don't like insurrectionists either. Just don't label us the way that way because we are Trump supporters. I think that's a fair statement. The left cries when we're in charge, but they benefit from it. They just want to be in control no matter how terrible they are at it, says Gary. Let's see, Yvonne, I didn't label all Trump supporters as insurrectionists. Liz and Adam supported, they talk about Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, supported President Trump's policies but didn't support his insurrection. That's one way of looking at it, I suppose. Isaac says if an individual supports Trump, then you support insurrection. That is an overstatement. That is absolutely not true. First of all, it wasn't an insurrection. If the BLM riots of 2020 were not insurrection, neither was this peaceful protest. As a matter of fact, it was a more peaceful protest than the BLM riots because nobody in the Capitol burnt down a Wendy's or looted Target or beat a woman with a 2x4 or kicked people to death in the streets or tried to blind police officers with lasers or actually set fire to a federal building, even though that they were inside it. So once again, I just got to point that out. All right. I just have to point that out. Jenny says, so sad. Trump was the best president ever. Margie goes on by saying, talking about the Washington Examiner op-ed, talk about being biased. Yikes. Yeah. The Washington Examiner does not like Donald Trump. They hate him because he tells the truth. Well, they hate him because he disassembled a great deal of the politics as usual and also exposed this very ugly side of the American government and the American media. He did that. All right. What I was chuckling about a couple of seconds ago was Max Guadiano, who's a dear friend and a mentor of mine. He says, you need a break. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm looking forward to getting past election stuff and reporting the news again. That's what I'm looking forward to. I want to get my popcorn ready to watch Nancy pass the gavel for the last time. Well, it always comes to an end. And I will tell you this, Nancy Pelosi has been the Speaker of the House through the era of government that spent trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars. Okay? And she was there for all of it as the Speaker for most of it. Let's see. Margie says that Kari Lake will win in Arizona, perhaps. Let's see. Ginny, Trump tells the truth. LOL, 16,000 lies in 4 years. Well, once again, who's determining what the lies are, Isaac? And once again, with 95% of the mainstream media coverage on President Trump as negative, I think that's probably an overstatement. There have been lies since then, haven't there? There have been some lies since then, right? I'm just asking. Okay. Let's see. Ginny says, let's pray things turn around and we do see a red wave coming. By the way, there were an awful lot of people that were talking about the fact that the Republican Party is even better. They are better positioned from a standpoint of political power mathematically in the 2024 election than they have been with this one. Now, that was before we found out any of the results. That was just something that was being said. All right, just passing that along to you. Let's see. Ann says, if I said all urban black women who voted for Democrats are cockroaches running to buy a can of Raid, what would I be considered? That is a very good point. It is. Let's see. Poker Monkey. Beto's new name is Nacho. Nacho Governor. Okay, man. He's up on that. He's just a tall, skinny Irish kid from El Paso. Let's see. Does anybody know if we won the House, says Ginny? No, we haven't won the House yet, or Republicans haven't. I'm not part of that. I just followed your lead there. I'm a conservative. I'm a constitutional conservative. And I believe the rallying point to put this country back together again, all of us need to look at the greatest of all governing documents ever in the human endeavor. And it's true. Let's see. What else? Poker Monkey. What do you label BLM and Antifas who burned down cities in most peaceful protests? That was the point that I was making with Isaac earlier. Let's see. Lame argument, says Arthur. Arthur Davenport. He and I were high school buddies. Arthur, what is the argument that is so lame? Please, by all means, elucidate, my friend. Let's see. When Trump told the people to march down the Capitol peacefully and patriotically, how does that incite an insurrection? Gary says, that's Poker Monkey. Gary says, the peaceful protest by BLM fit the definition of insurrection better than January 6th. I would agree. Let's see. They're still counting votes, said Marjorie. Yes, they are. Nancy is the poster child for term limits. Once again, I want to talk a little bit about term limits here. Not in the Constitution of the United States. And I believe that's for a reason. I believe that Americans can have term limits anytime they choose. They just vote for somebody else. I've sat behind this microphone time and time and time again and said, for crying out loud, let's vote for someone else. If you're a Democrat, just vote for another Democrat. I'm not asking you to feed at the trough of Republican genius. That's not what I'm saying, because the Republicans don't have enough to feed anybody, let alone themselves. That being said, the people of the United States have term limits in their hands every 2 years. Now, the people who framed the Constitution, they knew about term limits because they put in presidential term limits. Just saying. They did not want a king. And so that's why they put those in. So they knew what they were doing. I think we should probably carefully consider all of that. Besides, we're about to see a lame duck Congress. What are they going to do? What will they do? We will see. Let's see what else. By the way, I heard that Nancy is heading for Egypt or heading there. Okay. Let's see. Poker Monkey and Schumer and Waters et al. Okay. Et al. I don't understand why the media can't be on our side for a change. Well, that's because Poker Monkey hits it right on the button, because they're leftists and conservative haters. Let's see, Poker Monkey, most of the mediums. Yeah, this is another overstatement. Poker says most of the media are Satan's workers. No, they're just leftists. Good one. It boggles my mind about Fetterman winning. He's not fit to be in office. I said that too. Not that he's some person that is. I'm sure that there's a guy in there. He just can't express himself, nor is he able to process written or spoken speech. Okay, that's just because he's had a stroke. Also, when it comes to Fetterman, I would have preferred that he wait another opportunity for a Senate run. I wish he would have done that, because it's much better to run for the Senate of the United States after you've recovered from a stroke, not while you are recovering from a stroke. Let's see. Ginny says on Margie's comment about Nancy Pelosi heading to Egypt, she says, hope that's a one-way ticket. Ooh, but they don't vote for somebody else. Term limits will protect them from their refusal to be informed. Well, once again, you really don't want a legislative or even a constitutional mandate, okay, that takes decision-making out of the hands of the people of the United States. Let me give you an example. There was a president who was elected president 4 times. That was FDR. The job killed him. But he and the American people made it abundantly clear that they didn't want to change horses in the middle of the Second World War. And if it wasn't for a cerebral hemorrhage that killed FDR, he probably would have been able to see that entire war through. Okay. Let's see what else. Presidential term limits. Ann says presidential term limits were put in place after Roosevelt. Okay. All right. That I was thinking about that while I said that, and I was planning on checking on that and fixing it. I will still check on that and fix it. So, what would you call the people who tried to prevent certification of the vote for the presidential election? Arthur. What's interesting about that is who decided what the motivations of those people were. Someone decided that. I'm not sure that most of the people there were 15,000 of them in the Capitol, in and around the Capitol. I'm pretty sure that most of them were not trying to stop anything. I'm pretty sure that what they were trying to do was let their voices be heard and show the government that we're still here. Now, whether you agree with their motivations or not, I think it's still one of those things where the mainstream media, decidedly leftist, decided to put that label on those people. And that's always risky, as we've seen. There have been labels put on Trump supporters, fascists, Nazis, terrorists, racists, and so on and so on. And that's basically what you're doing there, in my humble opinion there, Mr. Arthur Davenport. Let's see, who else? Let's see, what? Okay, yeah. Ginny says, Margie says, Ginny, I hope you're right. She will not be missed. Well, she'll be missed by some people. I just don't know who they are. Term limits will help a long-termer getting corrupt from getting corrupt. I'm expecting that's what Gary wanted to say. Replying to Arthur says, Anne, what would you call the people who wanted the presidential election held up for investigation? That's a good point. Let's see. Replying to Margie, I agree 100%, says Ginny. And then Isaac says, for 2 months, you guys said the election was stolen. Stop the steal. Trump made it clear that he wanted Pence to stop the certification. Okay, that's President Trump. And he's talking to his vice president at the time and doing so publicly. Was that a good statement? Not so sure. And we'll see as we keep parsing through the results of this election, whether or not that was actually what happened. Arthur replies, didn't say most. I'm referring to a particular group. You're skirting the question. What question? I'm sorry. What question was that, Arthur? What would you call the people who tried to prevent certification of the vote for the presidential election? Okay. What I would call them is Americans with a point of view. And once again, that's peaceful protest. Again, if the BLM riots were peaceful protests, so was that. As a matter of fact, it was more peaceful. Let's see. What else? Most of Americans aren't falling for that narrative, Mr. Wells, says Langston. I'm not trying to get Americans to fall for anything, Langston. Stop being snarky. Stop it. I'm just reporting the news, dude. Replying to Arthur Davenport, you're making unfounded accusations. Talking to people during the rally. Well, he wasn't able to talk to people during the rally. More about that next. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The President of the United States has taken the podium and is speaking about the midterm elections. We're going to join that live, and we're going to keep it going. We are not going to take some breaks until the President is finished talking. He also plans on taking questions. So let's go immediately to the President of the United States as he talks about the results, or at least some of the results, since all of them are not known, of the midterm elections.
I told him that I was the first elected, the second youngest person ever elected United States Senator at 29. That I have no doubt he's off to an incredible start and what I'm sure will be a long, distinguished career. And when he's president and they say Joe Biden's out in the outer office, I don't want to say Joe who. But the voters were also clear that they are still frustrated. I get it. I understand it's been a really tough few years in this country for so many people. When I came to office, we inherited a nation with a pandemic raging and an economy that was reeling. And we acted quickly and boldly to vaccinate the country and to create a stable and sustained growth in our economy. Long-term investment to rebuild America itself, our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, clean water systems, high-speed internet. And we're just getting started. The interesting thing is that this is all going to really come into clear view for people in the months of January, February, March of next year. It's just getting underway. So I'm optimistic about how the public's going to even be more embracive of what we've done. Historic investments that are leading companies to invest literally hundreds of billions of dollars combined to build semiconductor factories and other advanced manufacturing here in America. It's going to create tens of thousands of good paying jobs. And by the way, a significant number of those jobs are going to be jobs that pay average $126,000, $127,000. You don't need a college degree to get those jobs. And we're dealing with global inflation as a result of the pandemic and Putin's war in Ukraine. We're also handling it better than most other advanced nations in the world. We're lowering gas prices. We're taking on powerful interest to lower prescription drug costs and health insurance premiums and energy bills. After 20 months of hard work, the pandemic no longer controls our lives. It's still a concern, but no longer controls our lives. Our economic policies have created a record 10 million new jobs since I came into office. Unemployment rate is down from 6.4 when I was sworn in to 3.7%, near a 50-year low. And we've done all this while lowering the federal deficit in the 2 years by $1.7 trillion. Let me say it again, $1.7 trillion. No administration has ever cut the deficit that much. And reducing the federal deficit is one of the best things we can do to lower inflation. But while we've made real progress as a nation, I know it's hard for folks to see that progress in their everyday lives. And it's hard to see the results from actions that we took while we have to implement what we've done. But I believe we took the right steps for the country and for the American people. In fact, if you look at the polls, overwhelming majority, I don't look at them much anymore because I'm not quite sure how to read them anymore. I hope you are uncertain as well. But overwhelming majority of the American people support the elements of my economic agenda. From rebuilding America's roads and bridges to lowering prescription drug costs, to historic investment in tackling the climate crisis, to making sure that large corporations begin to pay their fair share in taxes. And I'm confident these policies are working and that we're on the right path, and we need to stick with them. All these initiatives take hold as they do, from lead pipes being removed from schools and homes to new factories being built in communities with a resurgence of American manufacturers. It's already created, by the way, 700,000 brand new manufacturing jobs. You've heard me say it ad nauseum. I don't know where it's written. It says we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world. We are now exporting product, not jobs, around the world. People across the country are going to see even more clearly the positive effects on their day-to-day lives. But I still understand why they're hurting right now. So many people are concerned. As I have throughout my career, I'm going to continue to work across the aisle to deliver for the American people. And it's not always easy, but we did it the first term. And I'll be surprised a lot of people that we signed over 210 bipartisan laws since I've become president, and we're revitalizing American manufacturing, gun safety. We did it together. and dozens of laws positively impacting on our veterans. And let me say this, regardless of what the final tally in these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well. In the area of foreign policy, I hope we'll continue this bipartisan approach of confronting Russia's aggression in Ukraine. When I return from the G20 meetings in Indonesia with other world leaders, I'm going to invite the leaders of both political parties, as I've done in the past in my foreign trips, to the White House to discuss how we can work together for the remainder of this year and into the next Congress to advance the economic and national security priorities of the United States. And I'm open to any good ideas. I want to be very clear. I'm not going to support any Republican proposal that's going to make inflation worse. For example, the voters don't want to pay higher prescription costs for drugs. We've cut that now. We're going to kick into gear next year, next calendar year. And I'm not going to walk away from the historic commitments we just made to take on the climate crisis. They're not compromisable issues to me, and I won't let it happen. The voters don't want more taxes for the tax cuts for the super wealthy and biggest corporations. And I'm going to continue to focus on cost cutting for working and middle class families and building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. I know you're tired of hearing me say that, but I genuinely mean it. That's what makes America grow. The wealthy do very well when the middle class is doing well, and the poor have a way up, and while continuing to bring down the federal deficit. Now, as we look at tax cuts, we should be looking at tax cuts for working people and middle-class people, not the very wealthy. They're fine. And if you can go out and be a multimillionaire, that's great. Just pay your fair share. That's all. That's all. Just pay your fair share. It's like those 55 corporations in 2000 that made $40 billion and didn't pay a penny in federal taxes. It's not right. Everybody has an obligation. So now they have to pay a staggering 15%. You all pay more than that for your taxes. So I'm going to keep my commitment that no one earning less than $400,000 a year, and that's a lot of money where I come from, are going to see their federal taxes go up. And I want to be very clear. Under no circumstances will I support the proposal put forward by Senator Johnson and the senator from down in Florida to cut or make fundamental changes in Social Security and Medicare. That's not on the table. I will not do that. I will veto any attempt to pass a national ban on abortion, but I'm ready to compromise with Republicans where it makes sense on many other issues. And I'll always put the needs and interests of the American people first. So let me close with this. On this election season, the American people made it clear. They don't want every day going forward to be a constant political battle. There's too much of that going on. There's too much that we have to do. The future of America is too promising to be trapped in an endless political warfare. And I really mean it. You've heard me say it time and again for the last 20 months or so. I am so optimistic about the prospects for America. We need to be looking to the future, not fixated on the past. And that future is bright as can be. We're the only nation in the world that's come out of every crisis stronger than we went into the crisis. And that's a fact. I mean, literally mean that. We've come out stronger than we've gone in. And I've never been more optimistic about America's future than I am today. You know, particularly because of all those young people I talked about, 18 to 30. They're showing up. They're the best educated generation in American history. They're the least prejudiced generation in American history, the most engaged generation in American history, and the most involved. Look, after a long campaign season, I still believe it, I always have. This is a great nation, and we're a great people. And it's never been a good bet to bet against America. Never been a good bet to bet against America. There's nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. We just need to remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America. The United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. And I'm pretty well convinced that we're going to be able to get a lot done. Now, I've been given a list of 10 people that I'm supposed to call on, and you're all supposed to ask me one question, but I'm sure you'll ask me more. And so let me start off with a list I've been given. Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions for you. First, as you mentioned,
How come we never hold you guys the same standard you hold us to? But anyway, go ahead.
Well,
I'm
filibuster
teasing.
You mentioned that Americans are frustrated, and in fact, 75% of voters say the country is heading in the wrong direction, despite the results of last night. What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is. Do you know anybody who wants us to get rid of the change we made on prescription drug prices and raise prices again? Do you know anybody who wants us to walk away from building those roads and bridges and the internet and so on? I don't know. I think that the problem is the major piece of legislation we passed, and some of it bipartisan, takes time to be recognized. For example, you got over $1 trillion worth of infrastructure money, but not that many spades have been put in the ground. It's taking time. For example, I was on the phone congratulating a Californian recently, and then someone up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the congressman who got elected. He said, "Can you help us make sure we're able to have high-speed rail service from Scranton to New York City?" I said, "Yeah, we can. We can. First of all, it'll make it a lot easier, take a lot of vehicles off the road, and we have more money in the pot now, already out there, we voted for, than the entire money we spent on Amtrak to begin with." And it's the same way. For example, I talked about through the campaign that we're going to limit the cost of insulin for seniors to $35 a month instead of $400 a month. Well, it doesn't take effect till next year. So there's a lot of things that are just starting to kick in. And the same way with what we've done in terms of the environmental stuff. It takes time to get it moving. So I'm not going to change. As a matter of fact, there's some things I want to change and add to. For example, we passed the most bipartisan, we passed the most extensive gun legislation, rational gun policy in 30 years. But we didn't ban assault weapons. I'm going to ban assault weapons. They're going to try like the devil. So I'm not going to change the direction. I said I ran for 3 reasons. I'm going to continue to stay where I am. And I know I fully understand the legitimate concern that what I'm saying is wrong, okay? One is that I said we're going to restore the soul of the country. Again, to treat each other with decency, honor, and integrity. And it's starting to happen. People are, the conversations are becoming more normal, becoming more, how can I say it, decent. Second thing I said was I want to build a country from the middle out, the bottom up, and that way everybody does fine. I'm tired of trickle down. Not a whole lot trickles down when you trickle down to hardworking folks. The third thing I know is still very hard. I'm going to do everything in my power to see to unite the country. It's hard to sustain yourself as a leading democracy in the world if you can't generate some unity. So I'm not going to change anything in any fundamental way.
It's on a different topic, Mr. President. Russia today claimed that it had evacuated the Kherson region and the Kherson city. Do you believe that this is potentially an inflection point in that conflict? And do you believe that Ukraine now has the leverage it needs to begin peace negotiations with Moscow?
First of all, I found it interesting they waited till after the election to make that judgment, and which we knew for some time that they were going to be doing. And it's evidence of the fact that they have some real problems, the Russian military, number one. Number two, whether or not that leads to, at a minimum, it will lead to time for everyone to recalibrate their positions over the winter period. And it remains to be seen whether or not there'll be a judgment made as to whether or not Ukraine is prepared to compromise with Russia. I'm going to be going to the G20. I'm told that President Putin is not likely to be there, but other world leaders are going to be there in Indonesia. And we're going to have an opportunity to see what the next steps may be. Nancy, CBS, Nancy Cordes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few questions.
Been saving him up. First of all, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said last night that it is clear we are going to take the House back. Do you think he's probably right about that?
Well, based on what we know as of today, we've lost very few seats for certain. We still have a possibility of keeping the House, but it's going to be close. And for example, in Nevada, we won all three of those seats, contested seats. I went out for each, and I spoke with for each of those folks, but we won them all. I didn't know that last night, so it's a moving target right now, but it's going to be very close.
Can you describe your relationship with Mr. McCarthy? How often do you speak to him? What do you think of him?
I think he's a Republican leader, and I haven't had much of occasion to talk to him, but I will be talking to him. I think I'm talking to him later today.
When it comes to your legislative agenda, when you were vice president, your legislative agenda basically ran into a brick wall 2 years in when Republicans took control of the House, and that lasted for the rest of the Obama presidency. Is there any way for you to prevent that same fate from happening this time around? If
Yes,
Republicans take control of the House?
yes, because it's going to be much closer if they take control. They can't, look, the predictions were, and again, I'm not being critical of anybody who made the predictions. I got it, okay? This is supposed to be a red wave. You were talking about us losing 30 to 50 seats, and this was going to, nowhere near, that's not going to happen. And so there's always enough people on the other team, whether it's Democrat or Republican, that the opposite party can make an appeal to and maybe pick them off to get the help. And so it remains to be seen. But look, I doubt whether or not, for example, all the talk, I'd ask I don't expect you to answer, but the rhetorical question, do you think that, Senator Johnson is going to move to cut Medicare and Social Security? And if he does, how many Republicans are going to vote for it? So it depends.
And then my final question. Republicans have made it clear that if they do take control of the House, that they want to launch a raft of investigations on day one into your handling of Afghanistan, the border. They want to look into some of your cabinet officials. They want to investigate you. They may even want to investigate your son. What's your message to Republicans who are considering investigating your family, and particularly your son Hunter's business dealings?
Lots of luck in your senior year, as my coach used to say. Look, I think the American public want us to move on and get things done for them. And, I heard that it was reported, whether it's accurate or not, I'm not sure, but it was reported many times that Republicans were saying, and the former president said, how many times are you going to impeach Biden? The impeachment proceeding against Biden. I mean, I think the American people will look at all of that for what it is. It's just almost comedy. I mean, but look, I can't control what they're going to do. All I can do is continue to try to make life better for the American people. Okay, Phil Mattingly, CNN.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 37 questions. Okay. Sir, at a fundraiser last month, you said, quote, the rest of the world is looking at this election, both the good guys and the bad guys. You noted you're going to the G20 in a couple days. You'll come face to face with many of those leaders the same moment that your predecessor is considering launching his re-election effort. How should those world leaders, both good guys and bad guys, view this moment, both for America and for your presidency?
Well, first of all, these world leaders know we're doing better than anybody else in the world, as a practical matter. Notwithstanding the difficulties we have, our economy is growing. You saw the last report. We're still growing at 2.6%. We're creating jobs. We're still in a solid position. And there's not many other countries in the world are in that position. And I promise you, from the telephone calls I still have and from the meetings I have with other heads of state, they're looking to the United States and saying, how are you doing? What are you doing? What can we do together? So I think that the vast majority of my colleagues, at least those colleagues who are NATO members, European Union, Japan, South Korea, et cetera, I think they're looking to cooperate and wanting to know how we can help one another. And what was the other question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No. So I think the One way I would follow up on that is you noted that you felt like there was a shift in terms of people being willing to show more decency in this moment. You've often talked about breaking the fever or kind of a transition from this moment that we've faced over the last several years. Do you feel like the election is what represents that? Do you feel like the fever is broken, I guess?
Well, I don't think we're going to break the fever for the super mega Republicans. I mean, but I think they're a minority of the Republican Party. I think the vast majority of the members of the Republican Party, we disagree strongly on issues, but they're decent, honorable people. We have differences of agreement on issues. But they, I work with a lot of these folks in the Senate and the House for a long time, and they're honest and they're straightforward. They're different than mine, but they're decent folks. And so I think that the rest of the world, and a lot of you have covered other parts of the world, and the rest of the world is looking at the United States. I guess the best way to say this is to repeat what some of you heard me say before. The first G7 meeting for the public, that's the 7 largest democracies, when I went to right after we got elected in February, after I got sworn in January. And I sat down at a round table with the 6 other world leaders from the European Union and Canada, et cetera, and said, America's back. And one of them turned to me and said, for how long? How long? It was a deadly earnest question. For how long? And I looked at them, and then another one went on to say, and I'm not going to name them, went on to say, what would you say, Joe, if in fact we went to bed tonight here in England, woke up the next morning and found out that thousands of people had stormed the Parliament of Great Britain, gone down the hall, broken down the doors, 2 cops ended up dying, a number of people injured, and they tried to stop the confirmation of an election. It's not the same situation, obviously, as we have. They said, what would you think? And I asked a rhetorical question, what would you all think? You'd think England was really in trouble. You'd think democracy was on the edge if that happened in Great Britain. And so that's the way people were looking at us. Like, when's this going to stop? Nothing like this has happened since the Civil War. I don't want to exaggerate, but literally, nothing like this has happened since the Civil War. And so what I find is that they want to know, is the United States stable? Do we know what we're about? Are we the same democracy we've always been? Because look, the rest of the world looks to us. I don't mean that we're always right. But if the United States tomorrow were to, quote, withdraw from the world, a lot of things would change around the world. A whole lot would change. And so they're very concerned that we are still the open democracy we've been, and that we have rules and the institutions matter. And that's the context in which I think that they're looking at, are we back to a place where we are going to accept decisions made by the court, by the Congress, by the government, et cetera?
So the entire genesis of that G7 conversation was tied to your predecessor, who is about to launch another campaign. So how do you reassure them, if that is the reason for their questioning, that the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, you just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by, if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again. Steve Reuters, I'm sorry, Steve Holland.
Thank you, sir. How do you interpret last night's results in terms of deciding whether you want to seek another term? Is it now more likely that you will run? And what's going to be your timeline for consideration?
Well, first of all, Jill and I have, and by the way, it's my wife, Jill, who's held a lot more popular than I am in the Democratic Party too. But at any rate, all kidding aside, our intention is to run again. That's been our intention, regardless of what the outcome of this election was. And the fact that we won, I didn't run, the fact that the Democratic Party outperformed anything anyone expected and did better than any off-year presidency since John Kennedy is one that gives everybody like, whew, sigh of relief that the mega Republicans are not taking over the government again, et cetera. And so my judgment of running when I announce, if I announce, my intention is that I run again, but I'm a great respecter of fate. And this is ultimately a family decision. I think everybody wants me to run, but we're going to have discussions about it. And I don't feel in any hurry one way or another to make that judgment, today, tomorrow, or whenever, no matter what my predecessor does.
Early next year, or what's your thinking?
My guess is, I hope Jill and I get a little time to actually sneak away for a week around between Christmas and Thanksgiving. And my guess is it'd be early next year we make that judgment. But it is my plan to do it now. I mean, but, okay, I'm sorry. Karen Travers of ABC Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. WNBA star Brittany Griner today was moved to a Russian penal colony to serve out her 9-year sentence. Do you have an update right now on her condition? What do you know about that? And does this mark a new phase in negotiations with the Russians to secure her release? Can the U.S. now fully engage in talks on a prisoner swap?
Well, we've been engaging on a regular basis. I've been spending a fair amount of time with her wife about what's going on with her. And my hope is that now that the election is over, that Mr. Putin will be able to discuss with us and be willing to talk more seriously about prisoner exchange. That is my intention. My intention is to get her home. And we've had a number of discussions so far. And I'm hopeful that now that our election is over, there's a willingness to negotiate more specifically with us. Thank you.
And if I can, your press secretary had said that the U.S. government has continued to follow up on that significant offer, but also had proposed alternative potential ways forward with the Russians. Can you tell us what those alternative ways forward are and how Russia has responded to those?
Yes, I can, but I won't. Okay, I can't. I mean, it would not be a wise thing to do in order to see if they would move forward. But it is I'm telling you, I am determined to get her home and get her home safely, along with others, I might add. April Ryan.
Of the Griot.
Of the Griot, excuse me, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, sir.
I got it right last time we did this.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Mr. President, I have a couple of questions on several issues. One, the Supreme Court. As you know, the Supreme Court has before it the issue of college admissions and affirmative action. What can and are you planning in case of a rollback that is expected? There are legal analysts that say that there will be drastic implications. There are tentacles from this, and they even say that this could impact Brown v. Board, the decision from Brown v. Board.
Well, first of all, I asked our Justice Department to defend the present policy before the Supreme Court. And like a lot of pundits, I'm not prepared to believe that the Supreme Court is going to overrule the existing decision. That's far from certain, and I don't believe that. But number one, what I did to try to change it is object to it before the Supreme Court of the United States, our administration. Number two, there are a number of things that we can and must do to make it. And by the way, this is a case involving an Asian American in terms of getting into school, and whether there's affirmative action makes sense at all from the standpoint of those who are arguing against it. But the fact is that we're we're also in a circumstance where there's a lot that we can do in the meantime to make sure that there's an access to good education across the board. And that is by doing things that relate to starting education at age 3, formal schooling at age 3, which increases not daycare, but school. All the studies over 10 years show that that increases the prospect of someone making it through 12 years without any difficulty, no matter what the background they come from, by 56%. And I also think that we should be making sure that we have the ability to provide for 2 years of education beyond that, whether it's apprenticeships or community colleges. And we also are in a situation where I think that, for example, I want to make sure a lot of it has to do with finances as well, that we make sure that we have help for people who come from modest means to be able to get to school. You know, the cost of college education has increased fourfold. And it used to be that a Pell Grant would cover something like 70% of the college tuition. Now it covers significantly less than that. So I want to increase the Pell Grants as well. But let's see what the Supreme Court decides. And I am hopeful, and our team and the lawyers who argued for us are not nearly as certain as the people you quoted as saying it's going to be overruled.
Next question, sir. The issue is inflation. The GRIO and KFF conducted a study of Black voters that said inflation was the #1 issue, and we saw it in this midterm election. What can you promise concretely in these next 2 years that will help turn the pocketbook for the better in the midst of staving off a recession?
Well, a number of things. First of all, Black unemployment is almost cut in half under my administration just since I began. More Black businesses have opened up, small businesses, than ever before. We're now in a situation where we're providing, through the Small Business Administration, down payments for people buying homes, because most people accumulate wealth in the value of their home. Most middle-class families are like mine. My dad bought a home, didn't have it, just scraped together to get home. By the time he was able to retire, he had built up equity in the home. That's how most people do that. But what I can't do is I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to get rid of inflation, but I do think we can. We've already brought down the price of gasoline about $1.20 a gallon across the board, and I think that the oil companies are really doing the nation a real disservice. Six of them made over $100 billion in the last quarter in profit. $100 billion. In the past, if they had done the two things that they have done before, one, invest in more refineries and producing more product, and or passing on the rebates to the gas stations, or they sell the oil at a cheaper rate than they are selling it now, not taking advantage, and that lowers the price of the total gallon of gas because that gets passed on. So there's a whole lot of things that we can do that are difficult to do, but we're going to continue to push to do them. And the other thing is that one of the things that makes a gigantic difference is what are the costs that exist in the average family and average Black community. One, prescription drug cost. Well, we're driving those down precipitously beginning next year. And, I'll bet a lot of people in the African American and Caucasian community that need to take insulin for diabetes. Well, we're going to be reducing that cost. They're not going to pay more than $35 for the insulin instead of average of $400. And I can go down the list of the things that my dad used to say it a different way. At the end of the month, the things you have to pay for, from your mortgage to food on the table to gasoline in the automobile, do you have enough money to do it? And when it's done, do you have anything left over? And medical bills are a big piece of that, particularly in the African American community and the poorer communities. They need help. And so we're driving down all of those costs, and we've already passed the legislation to do that. It's just taking effect. So there's a lot of things we can do to affect the things that people need on a monthly basis to reduce their inflation, their cost of living. And so, But I am optimistic because we continue to grow and at a rational pace. We are not anywhere near a recession right now in terms of the growth, but I think we can have what most economists call a soft landing. I'm convinced that we're going to be able to gradually bring down prices so that they, in fact, end up with us not having to move into a recession to be able to get control of inflation.
Mr. President, last question on humanity. Everybody else got some. Well, you're coming.
Okay, go ahead.
Last question on humanity. Sir, you can't legislate and you can't executive order out the issue of empathy or the lack thereof in the midst of this rhetoric, this heated political rhetoric. What's next?
Part of what I think leadership requires, and I hope I meet the standard, is letting people know you understand their problem. Again, my dad used to have an expression. He said, I don't expect the government to solve my problems. I expect them at least know what they are, understand them. And like a lot of you, we've been very fortunate as a family, but we've also been through a lot of fairly tough times. And I've had the great advantage of having a family to get through them. When my first wife and daughter were killed when a tractor trailer broadsided them and killed my wife and killed my first wife and killed my daughter. And my two boys are expected to die. It took the jaws of life 3 hours to get them out there on top of their dead mother and dead sister. I understand what that pain's like. And when Jill and I lost Bo after a year in Iraq, winning the Bronze Star Conspicuous Service Medal, a major in the United States military, came home with stage 4 glioblastoma because he lived about between 200 and 500 yards from a burn pit that's 10 feet deep and as big as a football field, burning every toxic waste you could find. You know, I think that we understand what it's like to lose family members, mothers, fathers to cancer. All of you been through that kind of thing. We've been fortunate, though. We've had each other. We've had strong families, Jill's sisters, my brothers, my sister. And so what we can do to deal with that empathy is make sure there's help available. Make sure there's people who are there to help, whether they are psychologists or whether they're medical doctors or whether they're social workers. Be there to help. Help just hold a hand. And for example, we can do an awful lot for a lot of families, the families you're talking about, if we reinstate this child tax credit. It cut child poverty by 40% when it was in place. I couldn't get it passed the second time around. So there's a lot we can do. And the empathy is not just talking about it, it's communicating to people you genuinely understand. And I hope a lot of people don't understand because I don't want people having to know the pain. But the second piece of that is let them know that you are there to help. You're there to help. And one of the things I've talked with Vivek Murthy about, and a lot of you have written about it, and you've written it well about it, is the need for mental health care in America. You know, when we got elected, there were something like, 2, 3, 5 million people who gotten their COVID shots. Well, in the meantime, I got over 220 million people, all 3 shots. But in the meantime, what happened? We lost over 1 million dead. 1 million dead. I read one study that for those 1 million people, they had 9 people who were each one had averaged 9 people close to them. A relative, someone they're married to, a child, someone close. The impact has been profound. Think of all the people, think of all your children and your grandchildren who didn't have that senior prom, didn't have that graduation party, who didn't have all the things we had that we took for granted, that impact on their psyche. So there's a lot we have to do. And empathy reflects itself not just in what a person demonstrates they understand, of knowing what people need and helping to make it happen. And we're trying to do that. And a lot of Republicans trying to do it too. I don't mean this is a partisan thing. A lot of people are trying to do it because they know we got a problem. Okay, excuse me. these 10 questions are really going quickly. Well, I've got to meet with some of my, talk to some of the Republican leadership soon. But anyway, Jenny Leonard, Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions. One, shifting back to your trip to Asia. When you meet with President Xi Jinping of China, will you tell him that you're committed to defending Taiwan militarily? And what are you hoping to get out of this meeting that will make it a success? Are you willing to make any concessions to him?
Well, look, I'm not willing to make any fundamental concessions because what I've told him in the beginning, and this is I've spent over 78, I think they told me, hours with him so far, 67 in person when I was vice president. President Obama knew he couldn't spend time with the vice president of another country, so I traveled 17,000 miles with him in China and around in the United States. I've met with him many times. And I've told him, I'm looking for competition, not conflict. And so what I want to do with him when we talk is lay out what kind of each of our red lines are, understand what he believes to be in the critical national interests of China, what I know to be the critical interests of the United States, and to determine whether or not they conflict with one another. And if they do, how to resolve it and how to work it out. And Taiwan doctrine has not changed at all from the very beginning. So I'm sure we'll discuss China, Taiwan, and I'm sure we'll discuss a number of other issues, including fair trade and relationships relating to his relationship with other countries in the region. And so anyway, so there's a lot we'll have to discuss. You want another question?
Yes,
Everybody else got one.
You didn't
Two or
say
three?
if you will tell Xi Jinping personally that you are committed to defending Taiwan.
I'm going to have that conversation with him.
Sorry, I actually have an unrelated question too. Mr. President, do you think Elon Musk is a threat to U.S. national security? And should the U.S. and with the tools you have investigate his joint acquisition of Twitter with foreign governments?
This is the Wells Report. We are covering the president's midterm press conference live on the Wells Report.
I think that Elon Musk's cooperation and/or technical relationships with other countries is worthy of being looked at. Whether or not he is doing anything inappropriate, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it's worth being looked at. But that's all I'll say. There's a lot of ways. All right. Kristen Welker.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I want to follow up with you on working with Republicans. Leader McCarthy again suggested that he is not prepared to write what he has called a blank check to Ukraine, and yet you expressed optimism that funding for Ukraine would continue, that the policies toward Ukraine would continue. Why should the people of Ukraine and this country have confidence in that, given the comments by Leader McCarthy? And just to follow up with you on your comments to Zeke, you said you don't need to do anything differently. If Republicans control the House, don't you need to recalibrate to some extent to try to work across the aisle with a Republican-led House?
Well, let me put it this way. What I meant was I don't have to change any of the policies I've already passed. That's what they said they want to go after. And so what I have is a simple proposition. I have a pen that can veto. Okay. So that's what I mean. I don't have to recalibrate whether or not I'm going to continue to, fund we're going to continue to fund the infrastructure bill, or we're going to continue to fund the environment, et cetera. We have to, I think there's a growing pressure on the part of the American people, expecting both parties and all elements of both parties to to work out their substantive differences and not just, I'm not going to do that because it would benefit that party. Just making it personal. So and you know, it remains to be seen what the makeup of the House will be. But I'm hopeful that Kevin and I can work out modus vivendi as to how we'll proceed with one another.
Will aid to Ukraine continue uninterrupted?
That is my expectation. And by the way, we've not given Ukraine a blank check. There's a lot of things that Ukraine wants we didn't do. For example, I was asked very much whether we'd provide American aircraft to guarantee the skies over Ukraine. I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get into a third world war, taking on the Russian aircraft and directly engage. But would we provide them with all the rational ability to defend themselves? Yes. We try those HIMARS. Well, the HIMARS, there's two kinds of, but in the average person's parlance, rockets you can drop in those. One that goes over 600 miles and one that goes about 160 miles. We didn't give them any ones that go to 600 miles because I'm not looking for them to start bombing Russian territory. And so we want to make sure that there's a relationship that they're able to defend themselves and take on what is purely the ugliest aggression that's occurred since World War II on a massive scale on the part of Putin within Ukraine. And there's so much at stake. So I would be surprised if Leader McCarthy even has a majority of his Republican colleagues who say they're not going to fund the legitimate defensive needs of Ukraine.
And just a quick one. Obviously, a lot of attention on 2024 now that the votes have been cast in the midterms. 2/3 of Americans in exit polls say that they don't think you should run for re-election. What is your message to them, and how does that factor into your final decision about whether or not to run for re-election?
It doesn't.
What's your message to them? To those 2/3 of Americans?
Watch me.
Okay, one more. Very quickly. We saw Governor Ron DeSantis with a resounding victory in Florida last night. Who do you think would be the tougher competitor, Ron DeSantis or former President Trump? And how is that factoring into your decision?
It'll be fun watching them take on each other. All right, David Sanger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also have a question for you about China, but before I do, I just wanted to follow up on something you said earlier. When you said it remains to be seen whether the Ukraine government is prepared to compromise with Russia. Previously, you've told us the only thing for the Russians to do is get completely out of Ukraine, go back to the lines that existed prior to February 24. Are you suggesting with the word compromise that you think that there is room for territorial compromise now?
No, I'm not. That's up to the Ukrainians. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine.
So what kind of compromise do you have in mind?
I didn't have any in mind. You have asked the question whether or not, if I recall, whether or not what would happen if, in fact, after this, I think the context is that whether or not they're pulling back from Fallujah and from the Kherson, the city of Kherson, and they're coming back across the river to the eastern side of the river, the Russian forces. And I said, what's going to happen is they're going to all both lick their wounds, decide what they're going to do over the winter, and decide whether or not they're going to compromise. That's what's going to happen, whether or not. I don't know what they're going to do. But I do know one thing, we're not going to tell them what they have to do.
You were asked before about your meeting with President Xi. At this point, the Chinese government, by the estimate of the Pentagon, is getting ready to bring their force of nuclear weapons up to over 1,000 weapons, significant increase from what they've had for many decades. You've seen the threats from President Putin about the use of his nuclear force.
Remember how you all went after me when I said that was real?
And what in your view happened? Do you think he backed off because of that?
No, I'm just saying. I just found it interesting that Biden's being Biden's being extremist And it turns out you all are writing about it now. Kind of fascinating.
So my question is, do you think that they are putting together a real alliance, the Chinese and the Russians? And do you believe that you need to begin speaking with President Xi about some form of arms control if he's going to get up to a level of weapons similar to what the United States and Russia have right now?
No and yes. No, I don't think there's a lot of respect that China has for Russia or for Putin. I don't think they look at that as a particular alliance. Matter of fact, they've been sort of keeping the distance a little bit. I do think that it remains to be seen whether Xi Jinping has decided that or backed off of his initial judgment that he wanted China to have the most powerful military in the world, as well as the largest economy. And but he's a long way from both. But I think talk about nuclear weapons and location, the number of them, and access is important to discuss. Thank you all so very, very much.
The President of the United States' midterm election press conference.
Thank you very, very much. We'll do another hour a little later. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And so the President of the United States, in his first comments following Election Day yesterday, although the election is not settled, he opened his comments by saying that he was very much interested in working with the Republicans. He also started his press conference by saying that he is aware of the financial difficulties of Americans. And he then sort of got back to where he's always been. He stood up for his agenda. He did that a couple of different times. He evoked the idea that he could veto something if the Republicans take charge of both the House and the Senate, or the House. And he was not necessarily combative. He did not seem to be overly smug, or he did not seem to follow what a lot of leftists are doing today, which is to essentially rub the Republicans' nose in the fact that there was not a red wave. So this president spent an awful lot of time talking to mainstream media sources, mainstream read leftists. Peter Doocy not apparent in that dialogue. Many questions taken. He was at the dais for almost 43 minutes. And you could see him slowing down as time went by. And he was indeed huffing and puffing a little bit. The hand microphone is not his friend. In the radio industry, we call that horse nostril. When you're breathing into your microphone. And so once again, those microphones are turned up very, very loudly because he has a soft voice to begin with. And that will pick up those breath sounds. They'll probably have to do something about that in the future. The president seemed alert. He seemed like he was doing very well, but I have also noticed that the president is not this way all the time. I don't know exactly what's going on with that, whether there's medication involved. If there is medication involved, he can't take it all the time because he has to essentially come down from it. I don't know what that would be. Perhaps if you're a doctor, you can share with us what kind of medication that might be. The only other thing that I can say is, let me double check something here. The only other thing that I can say is that the president did not take a question about a particular subject that was brought up by one of the people in our chat room. Do you have any idea what that subject that was totally and completely missed was? I was surprised. And I'm pretty sure that when I was talking about mainstream read leftist news organizations, I was pretty sure that Peter Doocy would very likely have spent some time talking about the border, which was a subject that was totally and completely missed. Totally and completely missed. Not talked about at all. even though the American people have made it stunningly clear that indeed the border is one of their issues that is top of mind. And so, certainly far above climate change. Now, the president is going to certainly stake out a position that he has when he says, I'm going to stick with my agenda. I'm not going to recalibrate it. I'm not going to recalibrate things that have already been passed. Well, yeah, but the Republicans, if indeed they're in charge of the House, and certainly if they're in charge of the House and Senate, will have a vote on that, Mr. President, just for whatever. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. What are your comments regarding the president's news conference? I do appreciate the fact that many of the people here that are watching this stuck with that press conference. It was 40 minutes, and we ran it straight through. One of the advantages of not being on a radio station, I don't have to break things. I don't have to break things up for breaks. So what do you think? What did you see? Give us a call. This is The Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're going back through the president's press conference just moments ago. We were just talking about the fact that the president did not take any questions regarding the border. And that would be something that would be top of mind, especially considering what the American people are focused on. The border is one of the top 3 issues. Why did no one in the White House press corps ask that question? That begs another question. Were these questions cleared in advance? Because someone would have brought that up. Gary says, I don't think anybody in the district, Washington, D.C., cares about the border even historically. It's not in their backyard, so they don't care. It was one of the great things about Governor DeSantis, Governor Abbott, and Governor Ducey of Arizona. What's interesting about that is that they sent those people to the district. That and the mayor, Muriel Bowser, immediately declared an emergency. I mean, it's just a particle of what we deal with every single day in Texas, not to mention Arizona and California. Let's see, there are some things he did not touch and should have besides border security. True. So, yeah, Clint Eastwood, we were just talking about, I made a comment on the chat room that the president is old and shows it. And he can go about a half an hour and then things begin to slow down. I also noticed something else. He apologized a couple of times for what he was saying when he got off on one of his rambles. He did that twice. He did that 2 times. Who is he talking to? Moreover, who is talking to him? So I'm just saying that there's something else happening here that we don't know, that's behind the scenes, et cetera, et cetera. And once again, I'm not trying to create a conspiracy theory here. But clearly, this president that we saw today is a much different person than we see in other times. He is lost in a lot of places. He misses things dramatically. He forgets things. He adds things. There certainly is difficulty there. And then there are times when, like today, when he's very lucid and doing just fine. What is that? What is going on there? That's what I'm interested in. Let's see. Max Guadiano says we need to limit the monies we send to Ukraine and other countries. We need to stop the flow of folks coming through the southern border. This is costing U.S. tax dollars. We, the people, are paying for these folks coming in. Completely correct, Max. Totally and completely correct. And it is a huge drain on the American economy and why they don't do anything about it. I mean, forget the American economy. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the fentanyl deaths. Yesterday, I was talking about a story about some 2 creepazoids. I'm not going to say that because they're innocent until proven guilty. So let me moderate my comment. These 2 creepazoids were trying to sell fentanyl to veterans who were trying to kick drug dependence. Close the border. Close it everywhere except the international ports of entry. Close the border. And I don't know why this hasn't happened, and it absolutely should happen. And oh, by the way, the money to get back to Max's point, the monies that we've spent to Ukraine would have been more than enough to pay for the finishing of the construction of the border wall. It's absolutely outrageous that it hasn't happened already. We got to close this border. Americans are dying because of fentanyl. Let's stop it. What is it? 3,000 kids every day? What is it? Is that the statistic? What are we doing? Aside from the fact that one of the sheriffs down there says it's just the fentanyl influx is nothing more than a chemical attack against the United States. Okay, by who? We already know the answer to that one, don't we? This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can use that anytime you choose. Or you can go to the chat room on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you're watching this on Rumble and Patreon, this broadcast was recorded earlier today. If you have a question or a comment, send me an email. thewellsreport@frontier.com. The Wells Report, all one word, all lowercase. The Wells Report at frontier.com. Looking forward to it. By the way, when you send me an email, make sure that you put the name of the platform you're watching this broadcast on in the subject line. I want to make sure that I see your emails and do something about them, like respond. Okay, so please, by all means, avail yourself of that. Further, if you find value in this show, please share it with your friends. Share it with your friends. Subscribe. Wherever you see this show, subscribe to it. Okay, and it would help us out immeasurably. So do likes and thumbs ups. So if you can do that for us, we sure would appreciate it. And yes, if you'd like to make a monetary contribution to the Wells Report, you can do so by going to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. And we'll do our dead level best to give you a show that's worthy of the dollar you spend every month. Yeah, it's like $1. There's a Patreon that I'm a patron of, and that is Subbrief with Aaron Amick. Aaron is an amazing guy who's helped me out immeasurably on this broadcast. And so I pay him $1 a month because I like hearing what he does. He does all kinds of like these essays on various weapon systems from a naval perspective. He's a former submarine sonar NCO. And so what ends up happening is he has a great perspective on all these things. And I kind of like that stuff. So I throw $1 at him every month. You can do that with us. We sure would appreciate it. This is an independent broadcast. And if you would help us out, I sure would appreciate it. And so the election keeps rolling on. It is election season, not election day in these United States. There will very likely be all kinds of various things that will come out in the next few days. And one or two of them may be control of the U.S. House of Representatives and control of the United States Senate. There are a lot of things that a lot of people are saying. I've gotten an instant message from Charles, one of my brilliant brethren with the Texas State Guard. He asks, boy, this governor's race in Arizona is absurdly close. Do you think there's going to be a recount? Oh, most assuredly. Most assuredly there will be. And we'll see how that goes. And once again, I haven't had a chance to go back and take a look at anything that may have transpired. So since I have a little bit of flexibility here, why don't I do that? Why don't I just go back and take a look to see if anything has happened since from the time that we were looking at all this. Let's see here. Let me see what I got. Let me go down here and we'll go to CNN for this. All right. Let's see. Biden says he can't control what the House GOP may investigate, but he's just going to try to make life better for Americans. That was a very canny and good political response. He wasn't going to be lured into whether or not the Republicans were going to spend some time investigating all kinds of things from the House of Representatives, including a possible impeachment of him. And so what he said was, you know what, he can't control what the House GOP might be doing. What he's going to do is he is just simply going to try to make Americans' lives better. That was a good answer. He also said that it remains his intention to run for re-election in 2024. One of the correspondents asked, 2/3 of Americans don't want you to run. What are you planning on? What are you going to do? He said he interprets last night's terms in seeking another term and whether or not the results make it more likely. He said this, quote, "Our intention is to run again. It's been our intention regardless of the outcome of this election." Right. So, by the way, he then joked that his wife Jill, sitting in the audience, is more popular than him in the Democrat Party. Let's see. Biden also said it's possible that Democrats will still hold on to the House, but it is going to be very close. Most experts, which have been proved wrong regarding the red wave already, says that the Republicans will take over the House of Representatives and the Senate is still in play. We will see. He responded when he was asked that he thinks Democrats have the possibility of holding the chamber, but it's going to be close. He was asked about his relationship with Republican leader McCarthy, who may be the next Speaker of the House. Said he hasn't spoken to him, but he believes that he's going to be talking to him later on today. In terms of how they'll potentially work together moving forward, Biden said there's always enough people on the other team, whether Democrat or Republican, that the opposite party can make an appeal to and maybe pick them off to get the help. Okay. By the way, in an interview with Fox News today, former President Donald Trump said that reports he was furious following the midterm elections were not true. It's just the opposite. The people I endorsed did very well. I was battling 98.6 in the primaries. I was batting 98.6% in the primaries and 216 to 19 in the general election. That's amazing. Trump went on to praise several of the candidates he endorsed, including Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley and Florida Senator Marco Rubio, both of whom Trump said he rallied for. Grassley and Rubio were both strongly favored to win before President Trump appeared alongside them. Trump also had favorable words for celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, who lost his senatorial bid in Pennsylvania to Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Oz worked very hard, but there were forces against him. Oz is a great guy. He had a lot of immovable forces against him. Asked if lackluster results would change his decision to announce a third presidential run next Tuesday, the former president indicated he would be forging ahead with that plan. We had tremendous success. Why would anything change? And so that is the state of play most recently, according to CNN. Now, let's talk a little bit about what the Republicans are doing. Today, they're struggling to make sense of lackluster election results after months of predictions about a red wave. Isaac, earlier today on the chat room, pointed out that with the economy the way it is, with prices the way it is, with inflation the way it is, there wasn't a red wave? What happened? Well, that's exactly what Republicans are asking. The blame game is erupting between pro-Trump and anti-Trump wings of the party. Other Republicans, meanwhile, say they're simply confused about what happened at the ballot box. Clearly, something was off. I mean, a target was missed. That was a House GOP aide talking to Fox News earlier today. Was it polling? Was it the issues we thought people cared about? The question that should be asked, assuming Republicans take the House, is, quote, what is our mandate and what do we do? That's according to that same aide. That's probably what's going to keep me up tonight, he says, or she says. Republicans are expected to take the House, though with a smaller majority than expected. Remember, unless my memory is not serving me properly, I believe the Democrats only have an 8-seat majority in the House. Democrats haven't stopped or even acknowledged the fact that they have a razor-thin majority. They just simply did whatever it is they wanted to do. I would suggest that the Republican Party do the same thing. But once again, never underestimate the ability of the Republican Party to blow it. Let's see. Republicans are expected to take the House. The Senate remains a toss-up with results in Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona unclear. That isn't stopping internal recriminations. Trump's opponents say the former president and his claims about the 2020 presidential election were likely a drag on the party that had advantages in a poor economy and low approval ratings for President Biden. You know, here's what I'm going to say about that. You know, the president himself is, and everyone acknowledges this, he is a drag on the Democrat Party. Let's take a good hard look at the drag that maybe President Trump has on the Republican Party versus the drag that President Biden has on the Democrat Party. I would say that the Democrats have a far bigger problem with being dragged down by President Biden than Republicans have with being dragged down by President Trump. And once again, you know, you're still talking about a very anti-Trump media, and you have to keep that in mind. I'm not telling you what conclusions to draw. What I am saying is that you got to keep this in perspective. Remember, this is a leftist biased media. The non-leftist part of that media is there's a large faction, including the Washington Examiner, that are anti-Trump. So once again, you have to keep all this stuff in mind as you keep doing these things, as you keep thinking about this. I think there's growing sentiment out there among Republicans. The candidates who were seen as elections deniers did not do well tonight, said Republican consultant Brian Steinhauser, talking to Fox News again. Now, I will tell you this. I have not seen a complete slate or scorecard about the 300 or so election deniers running for office. I know that there certainly is at least an idea that the way to frame this is that election deniers are indeed going to go down to defeat, but I'm not exactly sure that's the case. So once again, I looked for that earlier today and was not able to find it. I'm sure it'll pop up in the next few days. Let's see. If it wasn't clear before, this is according to an unnamed GOP lawmaker from the House of Representatives. If it wasn't clear before, it should be now. We have a Trump problem. Turns out that candidate quality does matter, another GOP source said. And that, of course, echoes the sentiments of Mitch McConnell, who was the Republican leader in the U.S. Senate. Trump's team, meanwhile, blamed establishment Republicans for strategic blunders and shunning some of Trump's preferred candidates who lost. It was a big night for President Trump's endorsed candidates. Out of the races that have been called, President Trump has racked up over 215 wins for his endorsements. This, according to a Trump spokesperson. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, on the other hand, whose job it is to support Senate candidates, abandoned winnable races in New Hampshire and Arizona, and still the Arizona race is too close to call. That's a good point. I wonder if it will hold sway. Sources close to Trump say they also believe the media is trying to raise Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' profile to build drama for a 2024 presidential race, which, by the way, the president alluded to when he was asked who would be a more difficult candidate for him to run against. Would it be President Trump, or would it be Governor Ron DeSantis? And the president said, it's going to be fun to watch. And frankly, it is going to be fun to watch. I just hope that President Trump remembers the 11th commandment that was quoted by President Ronald Reagan, who said, "Thou shalt not speak ill of thy fellow Republican." That's something the former president is going to have to learn. And he's going to have to be very, very careful in this primary. And Ron DeSanctimonious, probably isn't going to go well. You're going to have to do it on policy. You're going to have to do it on policy, and you're going to have to tell the American people why it's essential to elect whoever runs. And if there's a target missed, maybe that's it. I don't believe the Republican messaging was off target. I believe what happened is something, again, the president alluded to, something we haven't seen before. And that is a sitting president not being seriously mauled in the midterm elections, something that President Biden said didn't happen since John F. Kennedy. And so when you take a look at all of this, with a clear eye, and please by all means do so, with a clear eye, what I would suggest is this: I would suggest that when we look forward, as we move forward in all of this, what we have learned is that voters of the United States need and will have rational policy ideas that make sense. And it's not like President Trump doesn't know how to do that. It's also not like Ron DeSantis doesn't know how to do that either. As a matter of fact, there are people that say, for example, did very, very well last night. One of them, Ron DeSantis. And like the Trump people said, maybe they're trying to lift Ron DeSantis' image. The headline from Fox News, this is the opinion piece by Liz Peek, says, quote, Ron DeSantis is the new Republican Party leader. Do you agree? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Gary Olivier says, John David Wells for president. What have I ever done to you, Gary? Cuts me right to the heart, man. What have I ever done to deserve that level of abuse? I'm okay now. You are watching the Wells Report as we go through the day after Election Day, which unfortunately we're going to have to do for several days now as we wait for results. Back with more in a moment. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. Tell us what you think. What do you think about Election Day? Yeah, what do you think about Election Day? What do you think about election season? Share with us whatever you choose. That would be very nice. By the way, there is a programming note that I must share with you. Tomorrow, I'm going to be off. I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I will, however, return on Friday, and we'll be able to make all the news, analysis, commentary, and debate that this show is known for on Friday. I just found out about this today. Okay, so it's kind of a surprise to me, and so I'm going to be off tomorrow. So we'll be back on Friday, and thank you so much for your kind understanding. So there's an opinion piece, and I just alluded to it before the break. It's by Liz Peek of Fox News. Now, Fox has absolutely decided that they're not on the Trump bandwagon. As a matter of fact, in last night's election coverage, nobody would even say his name. Nobody would even say the word Trump. Don't know what's going on there, but this piece comes out on Fox News from Liz Peek. The biggest winner of the midterm elections was, without a doubt, Governor Ron DeSantis. He had a breathtaking night. There was no doubt about it. What he did in Florida was amazing. Okay? The biggest loser, she says, is Donald Trump, whose handpicked loyalist candidate in a number of races struggled to beat vulnerable Democrats. Once again, the former president may have cost Republicans control of the Senate in a year when it was theirs to lose. Once again, I'm relatively sure that the drag put on the Democrat Party by President Biden is far more, shall we say, far stronger than the drag put on the Republican Party by Donald Trump. Now, once again, I've told you this before. Donald Trump had to run against two political parties when he won in 2016. He's still running against both political parties. There are a few mistakes that I think President Trump made. One was when he refused to release his tax returns. That's been political fodder for 6 years. The other mistake that he made in all of this was the fact that he continues to want to rehabilitate the Republican Party. What President Trump should do, especially if some of this anti-Trump reporting, even on, say, pro-conservative news sources, not that there are many of them, what he might want to do is he might want to switch to the Conservative Party of the United States. The Republican Party would have to interact with him then. They would have to. And that would probably be a better finish for his political career under those circumstances. And like I said, I'm not exactly sure about whether or not this idea of a third party would be in anyone's interests. But he would have a chance to win, depending on what he chose to do with his 74 million friends. If he could take most of those friends with him, then as far as I know, he would have a chance to win. And that, by the way, has happened before. Theodore Roosevelt was a guy that was a populist president. As a matter of fact, Theodore Roosevelt and Donald Trump actually have a lot in common. And his Bull Moose Party was very successful. Would a conservative party of the United States be given birth to a Trump candidacy in 2024? Again, we will see. So anyway, getting back to this op-ed piece, many will conclude on the basis of the midterm 2022 results that the Republican Party is ready to move on without Donald Trump as his leader. What she asserts is Ron DeSantis, with his incredibly strong win in Florida, would be someone who could be named the new leader of the Republican Party. Do you agree? Do you agree? A173792172. A173792172. What are your thoughts? DeSantis scored the win in Florida. In Miami-Dade County, a region which President Joe Biden won by 16 points in 2020, the popular governor won easily. Not only the margin of victory was astounding in itself, it reinforced an emerging reality. Hispanic voters are shifting away from their long-term alliance to Democrats. Yeah. DeSantis won because he embraced Trumpian policies, stood firm against the woke mob, led his state through the pandemic with brilliance, and more recently, managed the horrific damage done by Hurricane Ian with great competence. Florida residents rewarded the popular governor by re-electing him with a roughly 19-point margin over his opponent. But let me ask you this. Is Ron DeSantis the new leader of the Republican Party? Yes or no, and why? This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Like I said, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. But I will be back on Friday. Okay? Again, nothing I can do to stop it. Got to go and do this. So I'll be basically busy all day. So there you go. Again, thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast today. We hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you on Friday with another edition of this broadcast. Until then, take good care, be safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you at the end of the week. Until then, see you. Alrighty then. Okay, so let's see what else. Good night. God's blessings. See you Friday. Take good care and know that I love all y'all. Excellent. Yes. Excellent.